In this series of videos, we're going to be looking at what I consider the fundamental conceptual issue in Tableau, namely level of detail. So this is really asking, what are we looking at? It's something that fundamental, right? Like, what does that data point that we're visualizing represent? And I know that seems silly, like, of course we know what it represents, but no, it's actually quite difficult sometimes, or at least a little tricky sometimes to say, oh, what does that really represent? And there's nothing worse than getting in front of a client or something like this, and for them to say, what are we looking at here? And then you get this sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach and realize actually you don't know. You don't know what the data points represent. And if you think that's a little far afield, it's not. Tableau can make this very easy to kind of get misguided. So what are we talking about here? Well, let's define level of detail, at least in conceptual terms, as motivation. And then we're going to walk through a whole bunch of different examples ranging from like static data sets through tables in Tableau all the way up to visualizations in Tableau to get an idea. So when we're talking about analysis of any kind or visualization, that entire discussion is dominated by this notion of level of detail. So as an example, imagine you have a big retail data set, and that data set has like location information, timestamp information, product information. We might think about looking at these data or considering these data at the national level. We might consider it at the regional level where we're looking at regional performance, store performance individual, so individual stores. Those are all spatial levels of detail, national, regional, and individual stores. We might also think about yearly performance or quarterly performance or monthly performance, daily, hourly, whatever you want. Those are temporal levels of detail, time levels of detail. But we could also ask ourselves, well, how are we performing in certain product categories, or among certain customer types, or certain engagement channels or platforms? These are conceptual levels of detail. But whether we're thinking about space or time or some kind of abstract space, in all of these cases, the level of detail is really driving our investigation. And which one of these we care about at any particular time is driven by that context-dependent business question. But we can't get away in any shape or form from considering level of detail somehow. So we have to be able to operate efficiently and effectively across a range of levels of detail. And it turns out that this is more complicated than you might think because there's some details hiding in the background. The issue is that Tableau has made a lot of things really easy, and that's great. It's made visualization easy. It's made kind of getting some of the visual cues and details correct quite a bit easier than other languages or platforms. But the problem is it's pushed a lot of that difficulty into level of detail. This notion of how do we specify level of detail, how do we work with level of detail, and what's going on. And it can get bad. It really can get confusing. And I've seen students get up to present something, and then you push a little bit and you say, well, what are we looking at here? And the answer is, I don't know what we're looking at, which is not what you want. Not what you want to do. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start with a static example in slides where we can just kind of visually inspect what's going on and get our feet under us, both in terminology and in process, what level of detail and aggregation mean. Then we're going to move into Tableau tables, because in the table, at least we don't have to worry about the visualization piece. We can just look at the table and kind of inspect and carefully move through things. And then we're going to finally move into visualization and see how all these pieces get fit together. So by the end of this, we're going to be able to define simple calculated fields. This is both for practice and to get us ready for more complicated things that I'll mention in a moment. We're going to be able to construct tables and do table calculations. We're going to be able to talk coherently about level of detail and aggregation. And we're going to be able to make visualizations at various levels of detail, see the data that are composing each mark. So if you have a scatter plot and you have a dot on that scatter plot, we'll be able to see exactly which data go into making up that particular dot. And then finally, we're going to be looking at simple level of detail expressions and making sure that if we're doing a calculated field that's a little bit more complicated, that we're doing that in a way that preserves the level of detail we want. And I know it's always tough to say like state learning objectives before we've actually done the lesson. So this might be the type of thing that you can come back after the lesson and say, okay, do I understand each one of these pieces? So I know this is an introductory video, but it might also be kind of a capstone video to make sure that all of this stuff is sunk in. So like I said, we have a kind of a systematic linear path that we're going to move through here. as we make this data set more and more complicated, but level of detail will be firmly under our grasp by the time we're done.